my Gavanen Melanine, and well met indeed. I'm Arche Galadurthan, head of the modding team behind Divide and Conquer, and welcome back as we bring you another developer diary, in keeping and entirely because version 4.5 was released yesterday. Do remember that if you'd already installed version 4, you must delete version 4 before installing version 4.5, and the installation video, which will be linked in the end screen and probably in the description of this video, will tell you how to do that. But otherwise, version 4.5 obviously marks the latest public release, so I thought it'd be a good idea to do a developer diary up until the point that we've now released everything to you, so that you can get an idea. Now, this list runs from the last developer diary, so it includes as well about a month's worth of work towards version 4, which released on the 29th of March, as well as however much time version 4.5 was released on the 12th of April. So there's only about 2 weeks between the two. And very little of this is for version 4.5. Most of it was already in version 4. So first of all, we'll deal with the campaign map, and then there's a few things to show you about the battle map. But if you're playing version 4.5, you have all of this already. So this developer diary is a bit of a retrospective rather than what you can look forward to in the future. So first and foremost, it's mostly just to go over, I want to just bring these to your attention, really, so that you know what we've been up to and things that were added in version 4. Anyway, enough of doing. Firstly, Tol Morwen has been added, this little island here with a little watchtower on top of it, and that will come into play in a little while, and we talk more about the dwarves. Also, as many of you will know, just north of the penis of Enedwaith, Tharbad has been moved onto the northern side of the Gwathlo River, and the bridge now goes north-south rather than east-west. Of course, Tharbad was made a single settlement some time ago, and the river now, the city has been moved, and the river has been updated to reflect the single settlement. It's also been changed to a generic Northodine large city, so it's a generic Dunedain city. It's no longer a custom battle map, so it's a cool battle map to play on. It's still a custom map. If obviously it's been created for Divide and Conquer, but it's not custom as in it appears in more than one location. But it's a cool battle map nevertheless. But there it is. A mountain pass has been added between Linhir and Dol Amroth down here, so you can get from east to west there without having to go all the way down to the Cape of Belfalas, it's called, sorry. And you can get straight across from Dol Amroth, which really, really massively assists your defence of Linhir and against Harad coming up from the south. The border of Itheland has been pushed slightly across to the east in order to force this road to create as well, because the game did not create that road previously. It didn't bother connecting with Linhir at this point, and instead it went up into Itheland and went out that way. But you will note that at the moment Itheland doesn't have roads, but when it does, it will connect with that little road slot just there. The level 2 health buildings that many nations get, I don't think I can show you it as the dwarves. I don't think we have... Hang on, I can go to the castle. Do we have dwarves? Do we have health? Town health. So the level 2 building, which at the moment for the dwarves is called Healer's Hall, that building now gives a significant reduce to unit retraining costs as well. So as well as giving your generals a really good healing ancillary, it now also reduces the cost of retraining troops. So a health building is very useful, or the second tier at least, is very useful on your front lines where you will be retraining your troops a lot. Additionally, the health building line has been extended to work with castles as well, whereas previously it was towns only. It is now a town and castle building, so your castles can avail themselves of that cheaper retraining. The garrison building, which is where obviously all garrison troops come from, and it's called an armory, I think. Garrison quarters? Armory, yes, there we are. Armory, and then Durin's armory for the dwarves. That building has been homogenized between towns and castles, so every region in the map now should get a garrison if the garrison quarters has been built. That is a thing. But do note that if the AI has built that building and you capture their town, it won't auto-destroy it. It never did. I don't know why people think it did. It never did, and it never does. You have to destroy it yourself, or you can just use it and then keep the free garrison. I don't understand why people report it as a bug. You just repair their building and use it yourself. It makes no difference. So you can use it if the AI has already built it. Traits that have no effect at all have now been given a little one line that says that they have no effect. There it is, shown on the broad beam. So there's a lot of traits added by Rohur quite nicely, which give a lot of flavour to your characters and just a lot more story behind your characters. But they don't actually do anything. They are just there to identify that Clan Lord Gore is a broad beam. That doesn't actually mean anything, and there's a lot of them like that. And as I say, it now just tells you at the bottom there, no effect. Because previously, people thought it was a bug that there was nothing shown, whereas actually it just doesn't have an effect. The main menu and the splash screens have been updated to better show that we are a submod of Third Age Total War. Of course, we include Third Age Total War in Divide and Conquer now, and we always will from here on out, which makes it much easier to install. But in an attempt to show everyone that we are still a submod for Third Age, and we are nothing without them, we've included that in the main menu and the splash screen. An additional, a minor one really, but Canned now has its own unique culture building. Well, it's the same one that Harad and Rune get, but the Canned one has been separated out, and that's purely so that if you play the Shattered Alliances campaign and you play as Canned, you can now build your culture buildings. But more importantly, if you play the Shattered Alliances campaign as Rune or Harad, you can now build your culture buildings properly. So that's one of the bug fixes for version 4.5. Rune and Harad get culture buildings in the Shattered Alliance campaign. Lastly, in every single region that's got a colour at the moment and is not grey, a culture building has been pre-built in all of those regions. So every faction's starting regions will now start with at least a tier 1 culture building, so that your culture can grow so you don't have to prioritise building that building, and by the time elite units are available around turn 60, you will have the culture to actually train them. Now, many regions this isn't a problem because they have culture way up in the 90s already, but some regions don't have that high culture. I'm looking at Dorwinion specifically, which has only 71% Northmen at this time at the game starts. So in Karasant and Sant-Anwi, they now start with culture buildings, which means the culture will increase quite nicely in the background, ready for your elites. This has only been applied to the faction's starting regions as you see them at the moment. So by that I mean, if I end the turn, Rune, for example, will expand to almost all of Rune, but none of those regions will have that building pre-built. Only Mistrand will. That's something to note. Now we talk about some changes to Brie specifically. If you play as Dunland or Enedwaith, then Brie will get Matraith in the turn 1 auto expansion, so they will be closing in on you a little sooner than they were before. In addition, Brathor of the Dunedain is now known as Brathor the Ranger when you play as anyone, because that's what the people of Brie would call him. They wouldn't call him Brathor the Dunedain, because Brielanders don't call them that, do they? They call Aragorn Strider, for crying out loud. So they would just call him the Ranger, and I fully agree with that, and I like that Rohur did that. So Brathor is now called Brathor the Ranger. He also has a number of traits that are rather fitting for a ranger as well, so he's just been spiced up a little bit. Mitchell Delving now starts as a village, not a town, but can be upgraded all the way, unlike Hobbiton Longbottom, which cannot. But Mitchell Delving can upgrade as far as you like, but it now starts as a village. In addition, Brie has been set to be a large city from the game start. It used to be a city, and then you could upgrade it if you joined the mercenary route, but in an attempt to ensure the survival of the custom battle and custom strategy model, Brie has now been upgraded to the highest tier, so it cannot upgrade ever, and it will be locked at that tier forever. So that's a good little feature to save the unique battle map there. Enedwaith, we turn to Enedwaith, and I'm sorry, now that you've seen it, you're never going to unsee it, are you? But Enedwaith's region completely looks like a really sort of malformed and misshaped penis, and I apologise for that. But Enedwaith's war script has been removed, which means they will not be forced to go to war with Brie or Dunland at a certain point in the game if they're not at war with anyone else. This, we don't actually think this is necessary anymore, because Enedwaith now does actually normally attack someone, or more accurately, someone attacks them. So it was no longer needed to force them to go to war. So we did away with it, because you as the player would often get chucked into a war that you didn't want, because you weren't at war with anyone yet, and it just didn't really work all that well. And also, if you played as a nation near to Enedwaith, it could screw over the balance by forcing them into a war that they absolutely would not have gone into for any other in normal circumstances. Now, the only reason that I mentioned the poor shape of Enedwyth is because every time I see it, I'm on the brink of saying it. So now that I've just said it and got it out there, we can all just move on and ignore the fact that that's what their starting regions look like. Also, Enedwyth now get Bregost in the turn 1 auto expansion when you don't play as them, so they get a little bit of a boost there, connecting their lands from Dolvorn down to Alkfud. Because I think they get Siduri and Londare as well. Deep breath. Let's move over to Dorwinion. Dorwinian's military support in the form of the side that you didn't choose, i.e. if you choose the Elves, then you'll get a one-off army of humans. If you choose the humans, you'll get a one-off army of Elves. Well, those armies now come at turn 72 and not at turn 52. So they come after the Barracks event. So you can no longer steamroll Rune the minute the Barracks event hits with your large army of either Elves or humans. Right, now the Dwarves of Eredluin. This is a key one because I forgot to talk about it in their version 4 overview because I'm just not really very professional, to be honest. And that is the Dwarven Relic script. So the Dwarven Relics is a sideline or an additional script alongside the rings, and it only kicks in if you accept the rings. The basic premise being, the dwarves have gotten their rings, and now they've got a taste for reclamation. They want all of their old relics back. And those relics are as follows. The first is the Broken Blade Narsil, which was made by the dwarven smith Telkar in the First Age, and the dwarves want it back. They also demand the return of Yol's Horn, which is known as the Horn of the Mark, which is currently in Rohan, and that was created by the dwarves and was stolen from them by Scatha and then Fram in our makeshift universe. And lastly, they also want the Sentient Blade Gurthan, which was Turin's sword, and the Dragon Helm of Dorlomin, which are both on the Isle of Tol Morwen, which is why it was added. So you have to acquire a ship and send agents over to the island to get those back, where you essentially dig them up and bring them back. You will, as you might expect, Yul's Horn is on one of the key generals in Rohan, and you get it by killing him and taking it from him. And Narsil is of course held by Aragorn, and again you get it by killing him and taking it from him. You cannot get it in diplomacy as far as I'm aware. The only way to get them is to defeat the characters that have them. And Gurthan and the Dragon Helm of Dorlomin are both just send someone over to Tol Morwen and stand there for a few turns while they dig it up. But you'll have to get a ship, which of course, if you've accepted the rings, the only ships you get are mercenary cogs. So you'll be able to get a mercenary cog. But it's just an additional little sideline, and it's paving the way for what in version 5 will lead to the reclamation of Basradum, which is going to be the second stage of the Dwarven Ring script, which wasn't implemented yet because we really wanted to get version 4 out to you all. And then we've got another year then essentially to hone the scripts further. But that's all in the future. Also, something to note which was wrong in the version 4 Eredluin overview was that if you don't want the High Elves to attack you when you've accepted the rings, you don't actually have to defeat them. You only have to capture Forlond and Mithlond. I made that change, so the fact that I forgot it is just a terrible indictment on my memory. So you only need Mithlond and Forlond. You don't have to defeat the High Elves in order to take them out of the script, which means you can ignore Imladris and you don't have to cross the Gulf of Lune. Now, of course, if the High Elves don't attack you, the Brelanders will. And if they won't attack you, the Dunedain will. So you've got to kill them all, but you only have to take Forlond and Mithlond. Which makes killing Brie and killing the Dunedain a little easier. Finally, the Dwarven Attacks on Eredluin, where Erebor will come for Thorin's Halls and Khazad-dûm will come for Hamguthol. Those attacks are now staggered. So if both of them attack you, Eredluin will attack on, I think it's turn 74, and then Khazad-dûm will attack on turn 75. So there is a turn between the attacks. Also, whilst we're on the subject of Eredluin and their version 4 overview, I did indeed misspeak, and the Elves, Brie, and the Dunedain will not attack for Hamguthol. They only come for Thorin's Halls, unless you, for whatever reason, don't own Thorin's Halls. So if you haven't got this, they'll attack for Hamguthol, but otherwise they only go for Thorin's Halls. For Rohan, one of the bug fixes for 4.5, their peasant militia is now available in castles. That's probably my fault that it was taken out of castles, but they've been re-added, so Rohan get their peasant militia back. Turning to the Ardanaim then. First of all, the runic units under the suppression system come now from the slave camp and not the town hall. So they've been uniformed and unified with all the others. Also, the units you get from Dorwinion now train from Neburka and Karasant, whereas before they only came from Sant'Anwi and Strondost. They now come from Karasant and Neburka as well, which is as it's intended. Also, there was a little bit of a bug in the King's Purse system, but the Ardanaim who start here when you play as them, your King's Purse will now be set to 3,000 as the Ardanaim. Your army upkeep will be anywhere before you capture your first town. This only applies when you have no towns. But your army upkeep will be between 1,000 and 2,500, and your King's Purse will be 3,000. So you always make a profit, but you no longer make an obscene profit. But you won't go bankrupt before you capture your first town. Once you then capture your first town, the same system applies, where it's 7,000 if you have one town. So the King's Purse sets to 7,000 if you have one town, 6,000 on 2, I think it's 4,000 on 3, 3,000 on 4, and then once it goes, it's 2,000 I think on 5, and then that's it. It will be 2,000 for the rest of the game. And that is because once you capture your first city, you then have to pay the proper upkeep for your entire army. But when you're a horde, you only pay something like 10% of the upkeep or something like that. So the upkeep is considerably reduced. But as soon as you capture your first town, you're not a horde anymore, and you pay full upkeep prices. So the King's Purse is boosted to counter that. But that now is set up properly. Also, if you capture Byrig up in Dunland, this is the actual Dunland region. If you look on any map of Middle-earth, this is Dunland. So all of this is just Dunlandish Gunth. So it was broken because the suppression camp didn't actually train anything in Byrig when this is where they should actually be coming from. So now Byrig will give you Dunlending units. And lastly, as something that we changed just to head people off at the pass, if you will, because they just can't understand the bizarre grievance. But the fact that Baruthiel's Rangers have a crossbow irked a lot of people. So for version 4.5, I simply renamed them, and they are now called Baruthiel's Watch. And then there's also one simple line in their description that explains that they have used crossbows and not longbows. Because people just could not get their head around a unit that's called Ranger and that has a crossbow. And I don't understand it myself. I mean, I appreciate, yes, we've made Rangers out to be they're like the human elite archers. So if you're a human nation and you get a unit with Ranger in the name, you can know that's going to be one of my finest archers. I want to train that unit. And so I appreciate it was a bit of a confusion there. But Baruthiel's Rangers are still the absolute best crossbow and indeed best ranged unit that the Ardanaim got. So they still had that elitism. But I appreciate they didn't have the range and they no longer had bows. So they didn't fit with the other Rangers. But I didn't think it was a problem, but lots of people have moaned about it. So we just renamed them to Baruthiel's Watch. They're just not Rangers anymore. Some people also thought that it went against our own law that we'd given them crossbows. And I read their description and that just makes no sense whatsoever. They're literally just descendants of the Guard of Baruthiel. There is no reason that they should have bows or crossbows or swords or spears, or they can have whatever they like. So anyway, rant over. They're called Baruthiel's Watch now, so hopefully no one will moan about it. Apologies for my derogatory form, but the things that people find to complain about just blows my mind. I'd never make it as a politician. The Elves, the High Elven Sculptor's Workshop, and the Lorien and Woodland Plant Preservation Buildings, or Gwythy something, I can't remember what we called it. It was a building that was very expensive. It gave about 300 gold coins a turn, and it increased your population growth. Well, those buildings have been cut out of the game. So if you play as Lothlorien or the Woodland Realm and you want to recruit Ents, you now need simply to capture Isengard. And you'll be able to train Ents out of Isengard itself. Do note that Ents will be overhauled in version 5 and the Ent script will return because, of course, Ents no longer crash the game. So we want to try and get them back in, and it was a bit of an oversight that we didn't get them in for version 4, but we hope to get them in for 5. And Ents will be a feature again, and also Rockburg will play a much bigger part because it is actually in Fangorn or on the borders of. But at the moment, you can get Ents in version 4.5 by capturing Isengard. One thing for version 4.5, and one of the key reasons why we've actually gone for version 4.5 and released this, rather than just being a little hotfix, is that none of the High Elf units now crash the game, whereas they did before, for seemingly no reason whatsoever. But now they've all been fixed, it's checked, it works, the High Elves all work, you can play with High Elves, no trouble. So that's good. The situation in Dale as well has been slightly improved at the start of the game. Your militia units now cost a little bit less in upkeep per turn. And also the nation of Dale now has a slightly larger king's purse at the start of the game than it did before. Turning to Isengard. Apologies, I should stop doing the deep breathing. Turning to Isengard. The faction heir, so Lurtz is what he's called at the start, is now called First Captain Lurtz rather than Chief Lurtz, which I think is a much better name, given that Captain is Tolkien's absolute preferred term for a commander in any military force. Tolkien uses the word captain for orcs, he uses it for Mordor, he uses it for Gondor, he uses it for anybody at all. Elves are called captains, dwarves have captains, literally every race. The only word Tolkien uses for someone who commands people is captain. So it does fit, and First Captain stands Lurtz out as the first of the captains, which I think is the best term for the heir of Isengard, because of course Isengard is totally unique in that Saruman has absolute power, and in truth you shouldn't even be thinking of an heir, because Saruman will just never die, and of course realistically, if Saruman ever did die, Isengard would cease to be. The faction is entirely related to him. In fact, we could, if we wanted to, we could even do that as a sort of sub-mod whereby Isengard is defeated if Saruman dies. That would be an interesting twist, wouldn't it? And then it wouldn't matter. But anyway, First Captain is the name of the heir. Also, the 3 half-orc units, Baneguard, Spearguard, and is it Axeguard? Or are there only 2 half-orc units? But anyway, they've now been renamed accurately to Orc Men, because they are Orc Men, and that is the name Tolkien actually gives them in the books. So they've been renamed from half-orcs to Orc Men. So instead of half-orc Baneguard, it's Orc Men Baneguard. Turning to Moria. This one is a simple bug fix, and I don't normally include these on the list, but I was so pleased to be able to get this to work. For courtesy with RK and Hummingbird's assistance, we were able to make the Flame Wrangler actually make a noise when it fires its projectile now. So the Goblin's Flame Wrangler, the Mangonel from the base game, it now makes a noise when it attacks, which is brilliant. A much needed improvement. Also, the AI as Moria, so not you if you play as them, but if Moria is controlled by the AI, then their population growth speed in Ostinethil is really reduced to try and stop them upgrading it to a town before you, as the elves, can get to it. Because if they upgrade it to a town, it's stuck as that horrible orcish town for a long time. Whereas if you can get to it, then you get a nice elven town out of it. So they get a slightly slower population growth in Ostinethil. Right, and that is really it. That's it for the campaign map. There's a few visual changes I'm going to go through on the battle map, and there's a few actual battle maps that we will start with to show you. So, there's 2 key changes in version 4.5. Or version 4, actually. I think they were both done for version 4. So the first that I will show you in a moment is Mangal now has a unique battle map. And you can see it also has a unique custom strategy model, which shows it off as one of these sort of crypt-like structures. And it looks very cool. And also, the big one is that Minas Morgul, RK has taken his deft hand to Minas Morgul and made it a much better battle map. It is still Minas Morgul, and it will never be upgraded to Minas Ithil, I am afraid, because of the restrictions we have in place. The only way we would ever upgrade Minas Morgul is if you all agreed that dropping Osgiliath to a single town is the way to go. That's the only way you'll ever get Minas Morgul upgraded to Ithil. And even then, I just can't see us doing that. These are too important to have as West and East. It defines Gondor so much by still holding the Western Bank when they lost the Eastern Bank, that to make that one town would just be atrocious. But that's the only way you'd ever get the upgraded Minas Morgul. But anyway, first of all, we shall jump over to Mangal and show you the custom battle map there. Welcome then to the new and fantastic battle map for Mangal, the Barrow Downs. And here we are attacking as the Dwarves of Eredluin, with the standard garrison that the Barrow Downs has at game start. But it is just a ruined little village with this cool sort of temple-like structure atop the hill. There are Barrow Wights, if you're wondering what they look like in battle and in game. But you will note, and if I bring up the map, you'll note that it's made up of lots of different sort of these barrow-like structures are dotted all over the map. Oh, cool, with the symbol of Arnor on that one. That's quite cool. And so these hills rise up out of nowhere, and it's quite a unique, I suppose is the best word, a very unique battle map. You still have to take the square and do everything you normally would, and it's a village obviously at the game start, and when it upgrades you will lose this battle map, but this time it works very thematically because you're upgrading it because people actually live here now. But this is Mangal, so a very cool little location. And the AI, or you, or whoever is defending, gets at least the benefit of being able to stand on that hill to rain arrow fire down on whoever's coming, which is quite a nice little take. But also do watch out, because then the enemy may be able to get up on that hill as well, and if they do, they will rain stuff down on you. So you've got to watch out for that. Oh, I've pressed the buttons out of line. So there we are, that's Mangal. Also note that Arcade created a bespoke fire effect specifically for this battle map that unfortunately, due to limitations in the game engine, is also now shared with, I think, Kharndum. Is it Kharndum? Arcade would remind me. I think it's some of the Angmar settlements have this same fire effect, and it had to be shared, unfortunately. Well, not necessarily, because it looks really damn cool, particularly when it's slow burning like that. It looks really good. But anyway, there we are, the new Mangalan battle map. A nice little nod to the fact that it is a horrible, ruinous place, and people don't want to live here until you build them a proper town. So there we are, that's Mangal. Now we'll jump over and look at Minas Morgul. Welcome to Minas Morgul then. So the first thing that you will note is that the starting domain of whoever is attacking is now significantly increased in size, so that you can line your troops up a little better before you have to cross the bridge into the city itself. But the key changes, and the main reason why this is a fantastic change, is once we get beyond this wall and into the gate area behind. You'll all recall how difficult it was to set up troops in Minas Morgul before. Well, it is no longer, and it is now a much bigger space with orcish tents and ruins dotted around as well. So you can now actually fight and defend within the wall once the gate falls. The area where the square is located has also been increased in size, but only marginally. The main change is to this large area out here, where you can now actually stop the enemy coming through. You're no longer hamstrung into... I used to have to defend... The enemy would come through and you'd catch them on the sides, just as they get through to the main fortress area. But now that is no longer. I also understand that I think you can put units on walls, whereas before you couldn't. There was something about the walls that was improved as well, but I can't quite remember what that is. But anyway, you will just note that it is now much easier to defend inside Minas Morgul, and there's also now some extra fluff and general stuff inside there, which is cool. So it's a much better battle map to defend, which is nice, because it is a key defensive location, particularly if you play as Mordor, for quite some time. So there we are, that is Minas Morgul. Now there are only about 3 changes for units, so we'll jump over and look at the battle map, and this relates to dwarves of all forms, as we shall see. So to the battle map then, and the changes affect Erebor and the dwarves, and it's only minor visual changes, no new units or anything like that. But courtesy of the Edain mod on Battle for Middle-earth 2, the unupgraded version of King's Shields, King's Axes, King's Halberds and King's Warriors now have their own unique look, which is this one here with these sort of interesting cross between chainmail and plate. And then when they upgrade to the Hobbit movie armor that you all know and love, which is only going to cause problems. I don't know why we've done this. Everyone's going to moan, why don't you use the Hobbit movie armor? Because people don't seem to realise you can upgrade to it. But anyway, they start with this sort of mail look. So there's the shields over there, and then there's the axes. So they still have the same pauldrons and helmet and everything, but it's just the main body of their armor that changes. It goes to full plate at the end, but it starts as these sort of joined... I don't really know what to describe that as. I have no idea. I'm sure someone out there will say something. King's Halberds have the same thing, and then lastly the King's Warriors at the end as well. So there you go. There's just a little visual change for the unupgraded unit, and then they upgrade to be far more heavily armoured. Also, the Erebor axe throwing unit hasn't had a visual change, except that they no longer have any shields. So this unit does not have shields, and that helps differentiate them visually from the Erebor infantry. which I've not shown in this particular overview, but it helps differentiate them. Also, the Iron Hills Mattocks, the unit at the very end, they have had a substantial visual change as well, and they now have a sort of chainmail look, and then they upgrade to get the pauldrons that the other units have, but they are much different in terms of design than they were in previous versions, so the Mattocks were given a new look as well. And lastly, it's for Rohan, the Guard of the Caves, were given throwing axes just to make them stand out a little bit more and to give them a bit more punch and pep when you train them from the caves in Helm's Deep. So those are the only changes to units since the last developer diary and moving into version 4.5. So I do hope you've enjoyed this developer diary. Any future developer diary for the next probably year, as I say, will detail things that are going to come. Version 4.5 has released. We don't hope to release any hotfixes or anything like that. If there are any minor bugs, they will stay until the next version. So I do hope you enjoy 4.5. I hope you've enjoyed the rollercoaster of Divide and Conquer thus far, and you'll continue enjoying. And until we speak again, Navar na den Perimad Melonin, and farewell.